It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning at the Riverside rest stop off Interstate 40. Truckers filled thermoses with bitter coffee. Tourists stretched their legs, and families herded sleepy kids toward the restrooms. At a corner table sat Silas Reaper Johnson, his leather vest marked with a Hells Angels patch that made most people give him a wide berth. At 6'4", scarred and covered in tattoos, he looked every inch the outlaw. But the man beneath the leather was a retired Marine with a Purple Heart, a volunteer at the VA, and someone who spent Saturday mornings reading to kids at the local library. Silas didn't care what people thought. Years of combat had taught him that appearances meant nothing. People saw what they wanted: a dangerous biker, a criminal, never the soldier or the protector. He took another sip of his coffee when something made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. A lifetime of instincts warned him to look up. Slowly, his eyes swept the dining area, scanning faces, reading body language. That's when he saw her, a little blonde girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting at a booth with a man and woman who looked like her parents. But something was off. The man in the wrinkled suit was sweating despite the cold air. The woman kept checking her phone, tense and distracted. The child sat perfectly still, her eyes darting towards Silas for only a second, and then she began to move her hands across the table, slow and deliberate. Silas froze. He recognized the motions instantly. American Sign Language. The girl wasn't fidgeting. She was signing, and what she was saying made his blood run cold. Help. Danger. Not my parents. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, and in that instant he knew this wasn't a domestic spat. This was a child in danger. Silas put his cup down slowly, his mind shifting into tactical mode. He'd seen enough in war and on the streets to know he had to move carefully. He couldn't confront them directly. If this was a trafficking situation, and his gut screamed it was, one wrong move could cost a girl her life. He needed backup. Without drawing attention, he typed a message under the table to his club's encrypted group chat. Code red. Possible trafficking situation. Riverside rest stop. Need brothers now. Silent approach. Within minutes, he knew the San Bernardino charter would be on their way. Whatever the world thought of the Hells Angels, they had one iron rule: you never harm a child. Silas watched them from the corner of his eye. The man was getting restless, muttering under his breath. The woman was jittery, her leg bouncing. The girl signed again, this time slower. Scared. Help me, please. His jaw tightened. He'd faced explosions, ambushes, and bloodshed, but nothing compared to the fury that came from seeing a child terrified and alone. He stood and stretched, pretending to ease a sore back as he moved closer to their booth. From here, he could hear snippets of conversation. 3 more hours, the man said. Then we make the handoff and we're done. No more complications. What if someone notices? The woman hissed. We should have sedated her like the last one. Can't. Buyer wants her awake. Says they pay more that way. Silas's vision went red. His fist clenched so tight his knuckles popped. But he couldn't strike. Not yet. One mistake could end in gunfire. He forced himself to breathe, to think like a Marine again. He spotted a young mother nearby, juggling 2 toddlers and a baby. Perfect. He approached her quietly, keeping his tone calm. Ma'am, he said, I need your help. Don't look, just listen. The little girl by the window, she's been kidnapped. Go into the restroom and call 911. Tell them it's an active abduction at the Riverside rest stop. No sirens. We can't spook them. The woman paled. Are you sure? I'm sure, Silas said firmly. I'm a veteran. I know what I'm seeing. Please. She nodded, gathered her kids, and hurried to the bathroom, heart pounding. Silas returned to his seat, placing himself between the booth and the exit. The girl saw his movement, her eyes wide with hope. She signed again, help now. Leaving soon. He gave her the smallest nod, then responded with his own hands under the table. Help coming. Stay calm. You're safe. Tears welled in her eyes, but she stayed still, brave as ever. Then, like music to his ears, Silas heard the deep growl of engines outside. The Hells Angels had arrived. 8 bikes, chrome gleaming, engines rumbling like thunder. Through the window, he saw them dismount, spreading out casually but tactically, covering exits, blocking cars, making sure no one left unnoticed. Among them was Tank, the chapter's sergeant-at-arms, and Silas's best friend since Iraq. One subtle hand signal told Tank everything. 2 suspects. 1 child. Possible trafficking. Tank nodded once and moved into position. To anyone else, it looked like bikers grabbing breakfast. But Silas saw the precision. Sightlines, exits covered, escape routes blocked. The man in the booth noticed them. His posture stiffened. He leaned toward the woman. "We need to go. Now." He grabbed the girl's arm roughly, dragging her out of the seat. She whimpered, a small, terrified sound that made Silas's blood boil. Silas stood, moving to block their path. Conversations around the rest stop died as people sensed something wrong. "Excuse me," the man said sharply. "We need to get through." Silas's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "That girl's hurt. Maybe wait for the paramedics." "She's fine," the woman snapped. "We're her parents." "Really?" Silas's eyes narrowed. "Because she's been signing to me for 10 minutes. Saying you're not her parents. Saying you kidnapped her." The man's hand shot toward his waistband, but before he could draw, the door burst open. Tank and 2 others stormed in, their presence filling the room like a wall of muscle and menace. "Hands where I can see them," Tank growled. "Slow." The woman tried to run, but Raven, one of the club's toughest riders, blocked her with arms like steel. "Not today, sweetheart." The girl broke free and ran to Silas, throwing her arms around him and trembling against his leather vest. Silas knelt, speaking softly. "You're safe now," he signed. "No one will hurt you." The girl nodded, tears streaming. "Thank you," she signed back. Then came the wail of sirens. Police, not ambulance. The young mother burst out of the restroom, phone still in hand. "They're coming." I told them everything. Minutes later, the rest stop swarmed with police, state troopers, and FBI agents. One of them, Agent Chun, flashed her badge. "You Silas Johnson?" The 911 call said a veteran spotted a trafficking victim, signing for help. "That's right," Silas said. "I recognized ASL. She told me she wasn't with them." Chin glanced at the girl, still clinging to Silas's leg, then at the bikers standing guard around the suspects. "We've been tracking these people for 6 months. You may have just broken the case." Silas shook his head. The girl broke it. I just listened. Agent Chun knelt beside the trembling girl, her voice soft but firm. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl looked up at Silas, as if asking permission. He nodded, signing gently, "It's okay. They're here to help." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "My name is Sophie Martinez. I'm 8 years old. They took me from the park 3 days ago. They said if I tried to tell anyone, they'd hurt my little brother." The air in the room turned heavy. Chen's eyes hardened. "Your brother? Where is he?" "They have him," Sophie said, her small voice cracking. "In a white van with a blue stripe. His name is Miguel. He's only 5. That was all the FBI needed. Within seconds, Chen barked orders into a radio. Agents scattered, coordinating with local police and highway patrol. APBs went out, roadblocks went up, and traffic cameras along I-40 were pulled. The quiet rest stop became a hive of law enforcement activity. Silas stayed beside Sophie, his presence steady and calm while chaos surged around them. He'd seen battlefields less tense than this. He knelt and handed her his leather vest to keep her warm. "You're safe now, little one. They'll find him." Just then, Tank approached, holding a stuffed dog from the rest stop's gift shop. "For the little lady," he said, voice rough but kind. "Figured she could use a friend." Sophie took the toy, hugging it tightly. "Thank you." 2 hours crawled by. Then the radio crackled with a voice that made everyone freeze. "We've got the van." Repeat, the white van with a blue stripe. 3 suspects in custody. For children recovered, 1 male, age 5, matches description of Miguel Martinez. The tension broke like a wave. Sophie's eyes widened. "Miguel," she whispered. Agent Chin smiled for the first time that day. They found him. He's safe. Sophie burst into tears of pure relief, clutching Silas's vest as sobs racked her small body. And when the police car finally pulled up with her brother inside, she ran to him so fast the officers barely had time to open the door. Miguel, small and scared but unharmed, stumbled into her arms. She wrapped him up and wouldn't let go. "I thought I'd never see you again," she cried. Miguel looked around at the dozens of uniformed officers and bikers. "Sissy, who are all these people?" Sophie turned and pointed at Silas, still standing by his bike. "They're heroes," she said simply. "They saved us." Silas swallowed hard. The battlefield had taught him how to endure pain, but this kind of gratitude, raw and innocent, hit differently. Agent Chin came over, her voice soft. "We'll need a statement from you, Mr. Johnson. Everything you saw, everything she signed." "Of course," Silas said. "Whatever helps." Chin nodded, lowering her voice. "Off the record, thank you. What you did today saved not just those kids, but probably others we didn't even know about. We've been chasing this ring for months." Silas gave a faint smile. "The real hero's 8 years old and knows sign language." Chin smiled back. "Maybe, but she needed someone to listen." Hours later, as dusk fell, the scene quieted. The bikers helped load evidence, gave statements, and stood by the girl's side until her frantic parents arrived. The reunion was tearful and raw. 2 parents running across the lot, collapsing to their knees as they pulled Sophie and Miguel into their arms. Sophie's mother clung to Silas, sobbing, "You saved my babies. How do I ever thank you?" "You already did," Silas said quietly. "You raised a daughter brave enough to ask for help." The next morning, the news exploded. Every major outlet carried the same headline: "Hell's Angels biker foils child trafficking at rest stop. Saves 2 siblings." Reporters called it a miracle. The public called him a hero. But Silas didn't want fame. He'd done what anyone with a conscience should have done. He'd paid attention. Days later, his phone buzzed. A message from Agent Chun. "The parents want to meet you. Sophie won't stop talking about the angel on the motorcycle. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., FBI field office." When Silas arrived, Sophie ran to him the moment she saw him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Miguel followed, clutching the stuffed dog Tank had bought. Their parents thanked him through tears. Sophie looked up, signing as she spoke, "You're my hero." Silas knelt, signing back, "No, you're the hero. You were brave enough to speak." 6 months later, the San Bernardino Public Library buzzed with laughter. Silas sat in the children's corner, surrounded by kids hanging on his every word. Sophie and Miguel sat in the front row, healthy, smiling, free. When he finished reading, Sophie raised her hand and asked, "Mr. Silas, can you teach us more sign language? So if someone needs help, we'll know what to do." Silas's heart swelled. "Yeah," he said softly. "Let's start today." He taught them the same 3 signs that had saved Sophie's life. Help, danger, not my parents. As little hands copied his movements, Silas realized something profound. This wasn't just about one rescue. This was about teaching awareness, empathy, and courage. The ripple from that single Tuesday had become a wave. Sophie and Miguel were safe, and now dozens of children were learning a silent language of protection. Outside, Tank leaned against his bike, watching through the window. "You know," he said when Silas came out, "the news is still talking about that day. People are saying maybe we ain't the bad guys after all." Silas shrugged. "Let them say what they want. We know who we are." "Most people don't pay attention," Tank muttered. Silas looked up at the California sky, the fading sun warm against his scarred face. "Then maybe this will make them start." As the roar of engines echoed down the street later that evening, the library kids rushed to the window to wave goodbye to the bikers who had become legends in their eyes. And in the back seat of her parents' car, Sophie signed to her brother, "See? Angels really do ride motorcycles." That night, Silas sat alone in his garage, staring at his old Marine dog tags hanging beside his club patch. 2 symbols, 1 meaning: protect those who can't protect themselves. The next morning, He rose before dawn, just like every other day. Helmet on, engine roaring. He rode east on I-40, the rising sun glinting off chrome. Somewhere out there, he knew, another Sophie was waiting. Another silent signal only someone paying attention might see. And as the wind tore past his face, he whispered the same promise he'd made that day at the rest stop. If I see the sign, I'll stop. Every time. Because for Silas Reaper Johnson, the oath had never expired. He was still a guardian, a soldier without a battlefield, a biker with a mission, a man who proved that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear leather and carry scars instead of medals. And somewhere in the children's section of a small-town library, a little girl named Sophie signed one final message to her classmates, the words that had saved her life and inspired everyone who heard her story. Help, danger, not my parents. A child's courage, a biker's instinct. One small act of awareness that changed everything. Because sometimes the loudest rescue begins in silence.